G'day and welcome to another edition of the Aussie Ideas Man. It's another evaluation of the Cretin because I just think he has poor logic and he deceives the gullible. If people could think well enough, I would not need to put out these evaluations. So it's the usual format. I watch, I stop and make a comment as I think about it, and then I run through it later and will add text boxes where I think I have not, well, you might say, not thought well enough on the spot, which is probably more text boxes than there should be there. Anyway, just have to get started.
Hello, everyone. It's Steve with APTERA Owners Club. Autoline Detroit put out this little short a few days ago where they essentially called APTERA a scam, and I wanted to kind of watch it together and kind of talk about it, okay? So let's watch it together for now.
I refuse to report on anything to do with APTERA. When did APTERA come out? When did it first?
6 or 7.
2006 or 7.
Was it that old? Oh yeah.
And they built.
I was writing
this
about it
prototype.
back then. Yeah.
And my buddy Paul Wilbur was brought into the company to straighten it all out, and he did all these things, and then he finally gave up on it. Until they put sellable units on sale and start selling them, I refuse to report on anything to do with APTERA. Remember Elio? Everybody was, oh, Elio, and they brought the General Motor plant. And to me, I have to be careful how I say this. I don't think they're deliberately trying to scam people, but until they start selling these things, this thing's a scam.
Okay, so he seems very kind of personally invested in not covering APTERA for some reason.
Okay, it's time for me to start saying what I think. First of all, we're treading on dangerous ground when anybody says, I think it's a scam. But at this stage, in comments in many videos, lots of people are starting to write this. I haven't yet. About close to 4 years ago, I actually said that I think it might be a double scam. I said I have no evidence, it's just my own personal opinion, and there is no proof whatsoever. It's just how I read things. So I haven't gone quite this far, and never have. I've even gone as far as to say my opinion has been strengthened over the events of the past 4 years. And I mean strengthened. I think I said something like it was a 50-50 two-way proposition 4 years ago when I started. I said maybe a double scam, maybe not. Toss of a coin sort of thing. And then as the years passed, I went, oh no, it's 60% possible a scam in my opinion, 40% genuine. Another year goes by, I think I went up to something like 80%, 20%. And I might have even mentioned in some comments that I'm about 98% of the opinion that it's a possible double scam, not just one, but the very first iteration of APTERA. My opinion always was that it looked like a scam that had gotten away with it, that it's gone scot-free without investigation at all. On the story that they were out of money, which a lot of legitimate startups have that legitimate claim, out of money. But there were things about it that made me think that being out of money was a lie. But as I said, it's well into the past and I had no evidence. It was just my gut feelings from what I read about things. The interesting thing is that I was always getting more than one story for the same event, lots of times over. And this in itself is indicative of it more being a scam than genuine if there are multiple stories, because somebody has to be lying for a second story to any event. So this is very interesting. So let's continue.
So this John McElroy, he's been running Detroit Autoline Detroit. It's like a weekly show that's been going on since 1997. So he's very well known and well respected in the automotive space, and he's been a reporter covering the automotive space for a long time. So John McElroy is a well-known name in this area. But I would say that what his number one, he just seems to have a lot of like emotional involvement in not covering APTERA, and I think maybe it's because he's good friends with Paul Wilbur. But he says he refuses to cover them until they have a sellable vehicle. But and he was mentioning Elio, but he's covered Elio. This is Autoline Network, and he has several shows about Elio. So he's covered them. He had no problems covering them. He covered Faraday Future. This was back 5 years ago, and Faraday Future's been doing this for almost 10 years now. And he's covered them. He covered Lordstown. Lordstown never delivered a vehicle. He covered Canoe. So Autoline doesn't really have a problem covering companies that have not delivered a product. He just seems to have a particular reason for not covering APTERA.
I'll try to think about what he said so far. There is poor logic in showing that this man has covered startups that have not delivered. John, right at the front, refused to cover APTERA on the basis that 2006 was too long ago, and 19 years without a product was enough for him to think that there might not be a product. So why cover something that might not ever eventuate? And I see that as very valid. 19 years of a promise and no product. Good enough. Now, all that he said about his emotional state is hogwash. It's a diversion. It's a reason for the gullible to believe him as he tries to discredit John. So ignore it, and ignore the fact that John has covered all these other vehicles. This is just another diversion. He's trying to make the gullible think that he's inconsistent. There's no inconsistency there at all. So let's keep going.
I believe because he said his friend Paul Wilbur came in and tried to straighten it out, but then gave up on the thing. That's a pretty generous way of talking about it. As you guys know, I was interested in APTERA in the first iteration. I had a reservation down on the first iteration of the APTERA. I was very excited to get it, and I think those of us who followed APTERA, the first iteration of APTERA, which liquidated in 2011, many of us felt that Paul Wilbur was the major reason that APTERA failed. He basically, he was brought in. So APTERA got some large funders. The large funders thought that Steve Fambro and Chris Anthony did not have the experience, both in manufacturing and marketing, to bring it to the market. So they hired people that they felt had more experience and more know-how. And they brought in Paul Wilbur. He had been running Saline and also American Specialty Cars and had worked with Chrysler and Dodge and several other companies. Then they also brought in Neil Hanneman. He's been on the Dodge Viper and Ford GT program. And they also brought in Tony Kirkton, who was his chief marketing officer. He worked for Audi and BMW. So they brought in people that they felt had more experience and more know-how. And then what happened is they so he was brought in September 4, 2008. They basically ousted Steve Fambro and Chris Anthony in 2009 because Chris and Steve wanted to deliver the APTERA. They decided that they would go after the ATVM loans, and the ATVM loans required a four-wheel vehicle, so they started going after four-wheel vehicles and spent money lobbying to try to get the ATVM loans to cover three-wheeled vehicles. And they spent a lot of time trying to develop a four-wheel vehicle version of the APTERA. This was Paul Wilbur in a Q&A with 2011. And things haven't changed, right?
Okay. Once again, I have to think back on all of the stuff that the Cretin has said, but basically, the Cretin has chosen his pet story, and I don't believe that it's correct. There are other stories, and I believe them better. In fact, I refer to the CEOs themselves standing in front of Jay Leno on a video saying why they left, and they just said they had better things to do or something of that nature. And they inferred strongly that they had walked from the company.
What happened there? Did funding run out? What was the problem?
Yeah, it was a great time for electric vehicles back then, but as the economy came down in 2009, it was difficult to raise money, and we were looking for a Department of Energy loan that didn't happen, so we had to let a lot of great people go and then reform the company about 2 years ago.
And they were upset that they lost the boardroom challenge to get rid of Wilbur. They were certainly upset, but I have found no evidence that the boardroom ousted them. There has been stories of that nature, as the Cretin is now saying. He's telling the story, but there hasn't been evidence. There's no boardroom minutes that are evidence that they were ousted. And we have the CEOs saying to Jay Leno on a video that they, or intimating that they left of their own accord, and the reason they gave was they had better things to do with their lives, which to me says they weren't all that interested in APTERA. They're not that committed. They pretend now, the second time round, to be highly committed. So what changed? Anyway, what else can I say about this from memory? Ah, yes. We're also talking about the investors that were supposed to be the ones that ousted the CEOs. Let me tell you what I know about these investors. First of all, they were a pretty large company. In fact, Google has so much money that they, out of petty cash, could finance this startup. And Google were in. Google lost a lot of money, and I believe, and once again, I'm relaying hearsay, so fact check it for yourself. But what I had discovered in all the multiple stories that had been passed around was that APTERA lost an X Prize race by overheating and failing to finish the race. And at this stage, it was soon after that that Google didn't supply any more funding. And I believe it's possible Google had decided that the silly trike was never going to work with its skin cooling idea, which was a major selling point. Once they decided the skin cooling wasn't going to work, they just pulled the plug, cut their losses, and walked away. If Google hadn't done that, if Google had continued to support them, they would not even need to look for this small government loan or grant or whatever. It was chicken feed. Google's petty cash would be 100 times more than the loan amount. And I'm talking petty cash. Stuff for writing off pencils and rubbers and little items. So that doesn't make sense to me. None of it makes sense that it's all blamed on not getting this loan. I think that was a diversion. And I have actually discovered with all these multiple stories where lies have to exist, that lies have been told a lot. This to me is just another lie. Oh, we couldn't get the loan. They had Google backing them. They lost it. They shouldn't even have been looking for the loan.
You have, it's front wheel drive, the motor's in the wheel, basically in the hub, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you obviously have regenerative braking. Oh, one other thing you mentioned to me I found fascinating. There's no, quote, traditional radiator per se to cool. The body is actually the radiator? Explain it.
Certain parts of the body have microchannels built into it, and we flow the coolant through there in specific areas to take advantage of the airflow. So the heat is radiated, but air doesn't flow through anything, so it's much lower drag. It's actually zero.
How about
drag.
sitting in traffic? Is there an electric fan to augment that? Or?
It's not needed. The heat is really generated on this vehicle when you're driving really fast uphill, or if you're parked and have the air conditioner on and charging. And in both those cases, the system is able to account for the...
So it comes standard with air conditioning?
Yes.
Okay. Electric power steering, no power steering? And when do you see yourself going into production with these?
We're hoping to have a development vehicle ready by the end of this year and start production in 2022. So we're not waiting around. We want to get this into people's hands. We have over 10,000 orders now, so a lot of people waiting for that.
Oh, that's good, isn't it? Yeah. Who did the design work? Did you guys do the design work?
Jason Hill.
Okay.
He designed the first one, and we're working with him and other aerodynamicists now to bring this shape into fruition. This is actually a little bit bigger, but more dynamic and less drag.
How aerodynamic is it? What is the coefficient of drag, do you know?
It's about 0.13.
0.13. Well, that's pretty amazing.
Yep.
I do here, press one of these buttons. So how would I do that if the window was closed?
We have a button here that you put your finger on.
I
and
see.
it opens,
Okay, okay.
Opens after that.
Why no vents to get engine heat out here?
There's such a big thermal mass in the electric motor, and we use such a little energy to push the vehicle. We only use a kilowatt and a half to push at highway speeds, so it just doesn't create a lot of heat.
Okay.
We can take enough heat out from inside the wheel to not have to worry
Boy, it
about
seems
outside.
awful low, almost like a lowrider. Almost seems like. All right, very cool. So what we have here is basically almost a T chassis, isn't it? We have this, and then a center spine that goes to the rear wheel.
Front subframe and then a rear subframe. They're not connected, and they bolt up to the composite.
Cool. Well, let's take it for a spin.
What else can I think about what's been said so far? Oh, yeah, he does say that these two people were brought in because they were experts. And if you were to compare their expertise with the expertise of these two CEOs that said they walked away because they had better things to do, and what they've done in the second version of APTERA, it is chalk and cheese. The original CEOs are completely inept